My world shattered, not with a bang, but with a whisper of a lie. Laura Kingsley, 38, usually a beacon of composure with her sleek brunette bob and tailored blazers, stood there, stiff as marble. She was wearing Dean Sterling's, 42, sandy blonde, perpetually looking like he needed more sleep. Faded varsity jacket, the one from his college days that he hadn't touched in years, now clinging to her slender frame like a borrowed costume. Her sharp features were set, not a tear in sight. It was a solitary lapse, she articulated, each word precise, practiced. A fleeting error. There's no reason for our entire life to unravel over something so trivial. But here's the uncomfortable truth. I already held every single card. She believed she was confessing, but I was simply listening to her repeat the script I'd already read. It wasn't just Brennan Reed's name or the hotel's anonymous location. No, I knew about the unsaved voicemail on her work phone, detailing plans. I knew about the burner phone tucked away in her antique embroidery box. I had the receipts, not from behind a furnace, but from a forgotten gym bag she rarely used, detailing expenses I never questioned. The most agonizing detail? The timeline. Because while Laura was tucked into that hotel bed, exchanging hushed intimacies with a man 20 pounds lighter and a decade younger, I was slumped in an emergency room, pleading with a physician to explain why my left hand had decided to stop existing. Severe stress, the doctor had concluded, scrutinizing my pale face. You're deeply exhausted. I didn't elaborate on the source of my exhaustion. The wife who hadn't returned home, the night spent curled in the cramped back seat of my old sedan, to escape the theatrical whispers of passion from our bedroom when she assumed I was on a late shift. I merely nodded, swallowed the prescribed tranquilizers, and performed the pantomime of being well. But beneath that calm facade, my insides were screaming. This isn't a narrative of vengeance. It's not even a dramatic expose of infidelity. At its core, this is a chronicle of the aftermath, when the person you've built your universe around calmly informs you that your entire foundation was a mirage. What truly hurts isn't the grand deception, but the 1,000 tiny splinters that follow. It's Laura asking for the salt shaker as if the morning wasn't fractured. It's my toothbrush inexplicably absent from its usual spot. It's the sharp, unfamiliar laugh she stifles, quickly shielding her phone. It's even our ginger tabby Milo abandoning my side of the bed. It's the chilling sensation of occupying your own living room, yet feeling like an intruder. Laura called it a mistake. But here's what no one tells you about mistakes. They don't whisper pet names, they don't send follow-up texts, and they certainly don't monopolize 6 consecutive nights of your wife's attention while you're out buying ingredients for a dinner that never materializes. This wasn't merely a confession. It was an excruciatingly drawn-out disaster, and I was still trapped within its collapsing framework, holding on to a sliver of hope that she'd reappear and revoke her words. Sleep was a stranger that night. I sat at our polished oak kitchen table, fixated on the half-empty glass of water Laura had left. A smudge of lipstick stained the rim, a vivid fuchsia I'd never seen her wear. Not for me, anyway. It was a shade reserved, undoubtedly, for him. This minuscule, irrelevant detail clawed at me more fiercely than any explicit text or crumpled hotel receipt. It implied an entire alternate persona, a Lara I was never permitted to know. A meticulously curated version, crafted for someone fleeting, someone who wasn't burdened with cleaning our shower drain or battling a perpetually clogged kitchen sink every Sunday morning. At precisely 2:01 a.m., I opened the notes application on my phone and began a different kind of inventory. It wasn't a tally of her transgressions. Those were already etched into my memory. Instead, I began listing the things she'd ceased to do. The spontaneous hums while preparing dinner, the absurdly silly sticky notes adorning our refrigerator, the impulsive invitation to dance when our song drifted from the radio. These small daily rituals had once been the invisible threads binding us. They'd vanished one by one, and I'd either failed to notice or worse, rationalize their absence with the comforting lie that people simply evolve. I just hadn't realized her evolution was a departure from me. The following morning, I performed the familiar ritual. Lara's coffee, precisely 1 sugar, a splash of oat milk, a dusting of cinnamon. She descended the stairs in her silk robe, eyes glued to her phone, uttering a perfunctory thanks without glancing my way. I watched her, truly watched, and the profound realization struck me. I was a stranger to this woman. She navigated our home as if it were a temporary rental, every aspect of our shared life now transient. Even her practiced smile seemed to be on a short-term lease. Before she departed for the office, I posed a single question, the words raw in my throat. When did I become not enough? Not a flicker of surprise, no denial, just a weary sigh, as if my anguish were an inconvenient interruption to her morning. It was never about adequacy, Dean, she stated, pulling on her coat. It was about seeking something else. She then pressed a feather-light kiss to my cheek and walked out, leaving me standing there, absurdly clutching her coffee mug, as if we hadn't just irrevocably shredded the fabric of our existence. That night, her late return was again punctuated by the hesitant jingle of keys in the lock, as if she anticipated the deadbolt to be thrown. I remained silent as she entered, offering no greeting, receiving none. She simply kicked off her stilettos, mumbled something about an exhausting day of back-to-back meetings, and ascended the stairs. The scent of her perfume arrived first, a sharp, opulent fragrance I didn't recognize. It wasn't her signature floral, but something new, richer, like a subtle announcement that she'd upgraded her life without my consent. I sat in the dim living room, my fingers clamped around the TV remote, though the screen remained dark. My thumb absently traced the power button for a full 40 minutes as I listened to the rhythmic rush of the shower. I imagined her, vigorously scrubbing away the remnants of her day. Him, the encounters, perhaps even me. The instant the water ceased, I pushed myself up and moved to the foot of the staircase. She emerged wrapped in a towel, clearly startled to find me there. My voice, flat and unadorned, broke the quiet. That perfume. Was it for me? She blinked, her expression hardening, then offered a brittle, weary smile. You're being absurdly dramatic, Dean, she dismissed, sidestepping me as if I were an inconvenient fixture. Dramatic? That was her chosen label for the churning dread in my stomach, the slow burn of humiliation, the raw, gaping void in my chest. But what she couldn't see was the quiet implosion happening inside me. I followed her into our bedroom, perching on the edge of the mattress. My voice, when it came, was ragged. It wasn't just once. You can stop maintaining the illusion. She paused, reaching for a sleep shirt from the dresser drawer. I told you it was meaningless, she replied, her back still to me. A single error. I decided not to abandon our marriage over one foolish night. Why are you so determined to dismantle everything? My ears began to ring. I barely recall my next words, perhaps an incoherent demand for the duration. She offered a number, devoid of emotion. 2 months, possibly 3. The information registered, yet failed to compute. All I heard was the relentless refrain. It meant nothing. Then she finally turned, her gaze meeting mine, and delivered words that would forever scar me. I was lonely, Dean. You were perpetually so mournful, so silent. You made everything feel burdened. I simply yearned for a moment of lightness. She desired weightlessness. In return, she dropped the entire foundation of our shared life. The following morning, Laura made pancakes. Pancakes, as if golden, syrup-drenched circles could mend a gaping chasm. She even hummed a cheerful, unfamiliar tune as she flipped them. A performance from a script where everything was perfectly fine. I watched her back from the kitchen island, a chilling question forming. How many times had she enacted this same domestic charade in another man's kitchen? Did she hum for Brennan Reed? Did she use the exact same buttermilk recipe? When she presented a plate before me and pressed a soft kiss to the crown of my head, I instinctively flinched. Her eyes, just for a millisecond, narrowed, but she said nothing. I sensed her expectation, that I would nod, offer a weak smile, and obediently eat, the desperate husband clinging to hope. I took a single bite, then set my fork down. I can't do this, I murmured, the words barely audible. Her humming ceased instantly. Do what? She inquired, her voice chillingly placid. That calm, it was her weapon, designed to make my raw emotions feel hysterical. This charade, I articulated, my voice gaining strength. These manufactured breakfasts, the suffocating silence, you sleeping mere feet from me, yet existing a world away, like strangers on a transcontinental flight. She laughed, a soft, sharp, bitter sound. I am trying, Dean. It was one mistake. You're behaving as though I've committed a heinous crime. My chair shrieked against the tile floor as I shot to my feet. You didn't commit murder, I stated, my breath catching. You simply made me doubt the authenticity of every beautiful memory we ever shared. For a fleeting moment, I witnessed it, a ripple of guilt, perhaps even a hint of remorse, across her face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. So what then? Is it a divorce you want? She challenged, her arms defensively crossed, a defiant glint in her eyes. She clearly believed I was bluffing. She was wrong. I wasn't bluffing. I offered no reply. I walked to the hallway closet, retrieved the manila folder I'd painstakingly compiled 2 nights prior, and laid it on the kitchen table. She stared at it, as if it were a venomous snake poised to strike. You've served me with papers? Her voice fractured slightly. I nodded. Not yet, but I will. Unless you give me the complete truth right now. Every single detail, no omissions, no attempts to diminish it. One lie, just one, and the papers are filed. She sank slowly into her chair, her hands trembling. A tremor I hadn't seen since this started. I finally had her undivided attention, but I didn't crave control. I craved absolute honesty. And what she confessed next utterly blindsided me. Ready to uncover the raw, unfiltered truth that ripped our world apart, she eyed the folder as if it were a loaded firearm. Her hands hovered, but she dared not touch it. Then her gaze lifted to mine, an expression I still cannot decipher, half defiant, half utterly terrified. You truly want the truth? She whispered, her voice like fractured glass. I remained silent, hollowed out and utterly drained. My presence alone was answer enough. And then the words began to flow, slow and cumbersome, as if each syllable dragged through wet cement. It wasn't a singular event, she confessed. It commenced after our argument in early spring, the night you spent in your car. I remembered it vividly. My anger wasn't directed at her, but at the crushing weight of a lost business contract and my father's deteriorating health. I felt everything I touched disintegrate, and I just needed to breathe. I hadn't meant to abandon her. She never asked for an explanation. She never followed up. I'd simply assumed she needed space too. But apparently that was the night she downloaded the application. I pressed her on the app's identity. She claimed it was irrelevant, but it was relevant. That wasn't a mistake. That was a deliberate choice, a calculated step toward another person. She hadn't stumbled upon him at work or through mutual friends. She had swiped for him, his name, Brennan Reed. He was just stimulating, she admitted, younger, impulsive, not so burdened. That word again, burdened, as if I were the dead weight in her life. She described their first meeting, a coffee, and the next drinks. The third encounter took place at a discreet motel just off Highway 3. Her tone was utterly detached, like reciting items from a grocery list. I demanded to know the duration. Until last week, she stated. Last week. So for months, while she feigned remorse for a single night, she had been actively seeing him, texting him, weaving an elaborate tapestry of lies, even as she lay beside me in our bed. My legs buckled. I braced myself against the table, gasping for air against what felt like a brutal blow to the chest. And then, the utter audacity. I ended it for you, Dean. For us. Doesn't that signify anything? I stared at her, this woman I had once envisioned growing old with, and saw a stranger. She was not the Laura Kingsley I had first encountered in that dusty, charming bookstore years ago. She was someone capable of months of deceit, yet still believing that terminating the affair somehow absolved her, made her noble. She expected accolades for ceasing to administer poison after watching it corrode the very core of our marriage. But the most agonizing truth? A part of me, however small, still yearned to forgive her. I don't recall the precise duration I remained there. pressed against the cool tabletop, battling to regularize my breathing as my heart hammered against my ribs, desperate to escape. My surroundings seemed distorted, the light too abrasive, the air too dense, as if our entire home was a silent conspirator, subtly mocking my blindness. Lara remained seated, elbows propped, hands clasped tightly, like a recalcitrant student awaiting reprimand. Yet I lacked the energy to shout. What words do you conjure when the betrayal isn't the deepest cut? It's the chilling indifference that follows. Could the true tragedy be her apathy, not her infidelity? I asked if she loved him. Her head shook instantly, perhaps too vehemently. No, it wasn't like that, she insisted. He was stimulating. He didn't grill me about utility bills or grocery lists. He didn't see through me the way you sometimes do. That last part felt like a surgeon's scalpel, carving me open. I hadn't even realized I was doing that, but clearly she had. And instead of communicating it, she'd fled to another, bestowing upon him the vibrancy and intimacy I was still desperately fighting to preserve. The images tormented me, her carefree laughter echoing in a stranger's car, her fingers deftly unbuttoning a shirt that wasn't mine, the expression on her face as she touched him with a tenderness I once knew, perhaps even greater. My chest felt like a collapsing edifice. Why didn't you just leave me? I finally asked, the question laced with venom. If I was so burdensome, so uninspiring, why not simply set me free? She blinked as if my inquiry were an egregious insult. Because I didn't want to forfeit our life, the home, our daughter, Chloe. You? I nearly choked on my bitter laugh. You didn't want to lose me? I scoffed. You already did, Laura. You just never bothered to realize it. That finally silenced her. For the first time, there was no glib retort, no pre-scripted defense. Just an engulfing quiet that threatened to consume me whole. She reached across the table, her fingers lightly brushing mine. I recoiled, not in a surge of anger, but from a profound certainty. If I allowed her touch, I would utterly disintegrate, and I couldn't afford that luxury, not yet. I informed her I needed space, genuine physical space. She inquired if I planned to stay with a friend. No, I clarified. You will be the one to leave. She began to protest, but I held firm. I gave her until the close of day to pack a single bag and relocate to her sister, Cora Maves. She desired forgiveness on her terms, but she had shattered me on hers. Now it was my turn to dictate the next chapter. And honestly, I had no blueprint. All I understood was that I couldn't permit her to remain, to continue the pretense that we could magically reassemble fractured fragments as if they'd never been broken. Because some breaks, you feel them in your very marrow. Her packing was agonizingly slow. This deliberate pace gnawed at me the most. She moved through the house with a theatrical slowness, as if daring me to retract my words, waiting for the precise moment I'd crack and utter, "Stay." I observed her ascending and descending the stairs with a modest suitcase, each ascent punctuated by a lingering pause at the top, a silent query for me to follow. I did not. I returned to the kitchen table, my gaze fixed on the chair she habitually occupied. It still retained the residual warmth from breakfast, a faint wisp of her new perfume, and I loathed the desperate craving to bury my face in it, to pretend this agonizing reality had never unfolded. When she was finally ready to leave, she stood by the door like an actress unsure of her final cue. Her eyes swept across the framed photographs on the wall, the antique key hook we'd discovered at a quaint market, the garish orange mug I'd stubbornly kept. Our life, frozen in a tableau, a museum exhibit from which she was now an external observer. "I'll be at Cora Maves," she murmured, clutching her phone tightly. "If you change your mind." Her voice faded into nothing. I offered no reply. I couldn't. My throat was parched, my hands tremored beneath the table. She waited another agonizing beat, then stepped outside and gently closed the door. It was the softest sound that door had ever made, and that deafening silence shattered me more profoundly than her entire confession. I drifted through the house that night like a wraith. Opening drawers, I unearthed forgotten hair ties, a stray earring, a solitary movie ticket for a film we never saw together. Tucked into the pages of a novel I didn't recognize, I found another receipt. Dinner for two at a trendy bistro on the far side of town, dated just 3 weeks prior. She hadn't even bothered with a convincing pretense of concealment. I sank to the floor of our bedroom, clutching that flimsy slip of paper, as if it held the elusive answers to questions that still haunted me. I waited for the surge of anger, for rage to incinerate the sorrow, but it never arrived. Instead, a boundless ache consumed me, as if an immense, hollowed-out space had been carved within my core, left perpetually open. I confess I checked my phone with an obsessive regularity. No texts from her, no calls. Perhaps she was occupied with Brennan, or perhaps she interpreted space as a directive to completely erase herself from my existence. Yet the truth was, I desperately craved her call, her pleas. I wanted to hear her parrot, "It was a mistake," until the words somehow, magically acquired meaning, until I could, against all odds, believe them. But there was nothing. I remained on the edge of our once shared bed, staring at the blank wall, pondering the silent demise of love. That night and the next, Laura remained silent. A week dissolved, then two. The oppressive quiet that had initially threatened to crush me gradually transformed. It became room, space to inhale. I began rising earlier, not out of obligation, but a nascent desire to experience the sunrise before the world roared to life. Her contact vanished from my favorites. I shifted the furniture, subtly reclaiming the space. The garish orange mug was finally put away, not from bitterness, but because it no longer belonged to me. This is how silence, once a tormentor, became my reluctant liberator. Then one crisp morning, as I retrieved the mail, something peculiar caught my eye. The garden, Laura's former pride and joy, was burgeoning with life. Vibrant marigolds, tenacious climbing ivy. Even the perpetually struggling basil, which she could never coax into survival, was thriving. A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in weeks. It wasn't born of longing for her, but from a profound realization. I didn't require her presence to flourish again. The immense weight I'd carried for so long, the heaviness she'd once attributed to me, was no longer mine to bear. I wasn't shattered. I was merely bruised. And as anyone who's faced true hardship knows, bruises heal. Sometimes they even make you stronger. 3 weeks later, a serendipitous encounter changed the rhythm of my days. Her name was Maya Dixon, a spirited woman with a cascade of curly red hair and a luminous smile. We quite literally collided in a bookstore. Yes, of all places, a bookstore. And found ourselves discussing forgotten poets over coffee for hours. I didn't reveal every detail of my recent past, not yet, but I laughed and she laughed. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I didn't feel like a ghost observing life, but a participant. I harbor no hatred for Laura Kingsley, not anymore. I genuinely hope she discovers whatever elusive lightness she was pursuing. But for me, I'm finished chasing shadows of affection from those who refuse to look back. I've picked up my pen again, reignited my passion for cooking, rediscovered the curve of a genuine smile. I am not wholly mended, but I am undeniably healing. And in the landscape of profound loss, finding that sliver of healing, that is everything. So if you're reading these words, if you're currently adrift in the same crushing silence that once threatened to drown me, understand this. This oppressive weight will not be permanent. This profound ache will not endure forever. Act now. Believe that sometimes losing what felt like your entire universe simply clears the canvas for something infinitely better, something profoundly real.